Imagine you are handed this brief little booklet, right? And someone tells you, here is the cultural and legal DNA of an entire nation.
Right, which sounds like a massive exaggeration.
Yeah, exactly. Because most of us, when we look at citizenship study guides, we just see, dry rote memorization for a multiple choice test.
Oh, for sure. Just cramming facts.
Right. You cram the dates, you learn the names of the prime ministers, and then you just move on. But if you actually look at pages 8 and 9 of Canada's official Discover Canada guide, they reveal this surprisingly intricate blueprint.
They really do.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to decode that exact blueprint for you. We are looking at how a nation actually attempts, both on paper and in practice, to balance absolute freedom with necessary duty.
Yeah, and it is a fascinating architectural document when you really get into it. Because when you strip away the whole notion of this just being mere test prep, you're left with the actual load-bearing walls of a society. Looking at the rights and responsibilities outlined in these pages, it reveals not just what Canada's laws are, but the underlying philosophy of why they exist in the first place.
Right, the actual why behind the rules.
Exactly. It exposes that classic tension between the individual and the collective.
Yeah.
And, how a state engineered its institutions to manage that tension.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand what a right even means in the Canadian context, the source material forces us to look at the historical bedrock first.
Right. It doesn't just start in the modern era.
Exactly. The text makes it very clear that Canadian law wasn't just, conjured out of thin air in a modern parliament. It rests on a very complex and, frankly, somewhat contradictory historical foundation.
Yeah, it's definitely a mix.
Like, we were looking at a system built on laws passed by Parliament and provincial laws, sure, but also English common law, the French Civil Code, and the British constitutional tradition. And all of these are operating simultaneously.
And the mechanics of that coexistence are incredibly rare.
Yeah.
I mean, you have English common law, which is fundamentally an organic, ground-up system.
Yeah, it's all about precedent.
Exactly. A judge makes a ruling, and then that ruling becomes the fabric of a law moving forward. So it evolves case by case over centuries.
It's very reactive. Like, something happens, a court decides on it, and boom, now we have a rule.
Yeah. But then, sitting right alongside it, you have the French Civil Code, which governs private law in Quebec. And that is, well, it's the exact opposite legal philosophy.
Wait, how so?
It's a fundamentally deductive way of viewing the world. The Civil Code is a comprehensive, top-down set of written rules. It's designed to anticipate legal issues before they even happen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you look at the codified principle first, rather than looking back at some past judge's decision.
So you have a ground-up system and a top-down system actively collaborating to govern the exact same country. That's wild.
It really is.
Plus the historical weight of the British parliamentary tradition trying to mesh with French civil traditions. To keep that immense historical friction from just, collapsing the whole legal structure, the guide introduces this central stabilizing concept. They call it ordered liberty.
Yes. What's fascinating here is that ordered liberty is the absolute linchpin of the entire document. The framework explicitly rejects the idea that freedom means the ability to just do whatever you want, whenever you want, without consequence.
Right, it's not a free-for-all.
No, not at all. In this legal philosophy, pure unrestrained freedom isn't liberty, it's anarchy. Ordered liberty insists that freedom is inextricably linked to the rule of law.
Right, and the rule of law being the mechanism that dictates nobody is above the law.
Yeah.
Not the prime minister, not the police, not the wealthiest citizen. Absolutely no one operates outside the system.
Exactly.
A good way for you to visualize the mechanics of ordered liberty is to think about a massive, complex city intersection.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like if you are driving, your goal is the freedom to reach your destination, right? Now, if we remove all the traffic lights, all the stop signs, all the lane markings, you might theoretically have absolute freedom of movement.
But in reality, you get gridlock.
Exactly. You get collisions, the whole system paralyzes itself, and suddenly no one is actually free to move anywhere. So the restrictions, the traffic lights, are the very mechanism that guarantee everyone's safe passage.
Right.
The rules don't destroy the freedom. They facilitate it.
That's a great analogy. And if we extend that intersection analogy, you don't just need the traffic lights. You also need a system to ensure the people operating the lights.
Yeah.
So the state aren't just pulling over whoever they want out of malice or convenience.
Oh, that's a really good point.
You need to check on the system itself. And that brings us to habeas corpus, which the text highlights as a foundational pillar here.
Right, habeas corpus, which translates to you shall have the body, which sounds super dramatic, but it operates essentially as the legal emergency brake for a society.
Yes, exactly.
It's the mechanism that forces the state to immediately justify, in an open court, why they have removed someone from that busy intersection.
And exactly how it functions in practice is crucial for you to understand. It means the government cannot just detain you without establishing a legal basis in front of an impartial judge.
So no secret arrests.
Right. You have the absolute right to challenge your detention. Historically, states have always used arbitrary detention to crush political dissent or, silence minorities.
Yeah, just making people disappear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Habeas corpus strips the state of that power. It demands evidence,
Yeah.
because without it, the rule of law is an illusion. The authorities could simply vanish anyone who pointed out they were breaking the rules.
Right. And because that bedrock, so the rule of law, habeas corpus, the integration of common and civil law, because that was established and tested over centuries, Canada eventually reached a point where it could fundamentally upgrade its legal architecture.
A huge milestone.
Yeah, the source text points to 1982 as this monumental legal shift. This is when the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was entrenched into the Constitution.
And entrenching those rights is a major structural change. Like, before 1982, rights in Canada were largely protected by ordinary laws and the traditions of parliamentary supremacy.
Oh, okay. So what changed?
Well, ordinary laws can be changed by a simple majority in Parliament, right? By elevating these rights to the constitutional level, it meant they became the supreme law of the land.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, a constitution is basically the rule book for the rule makers. It severely limits what future governments can legally legislate away.
That makes sense. And the guide outlines these fundamental freedoms that were locked in during this 1982 shift. It's a pretty robust list, actually. Freedom of conscience, religion, thought, belief, opinion, and expression.
It covers a lot of ground.
It does. It also includes freedom of the press, peaceful assembly, and association. But, and this is important, the text includes a massive caveat, which ties right back to our traffic light metaphor.
Right, the limits.
Yeah. These freedoms are guaranteed, but they are not absolute. They must be exercised within reasonable limits prescribed by law, respecting the rights of others.
And the mechanism of how that balance is struck is where the legal system really earns its keep. I mean, freedom of expression is constitutionally protected, but that does not provide a legal shield for, say, inciting violence against a specific group.
Right. Or committing perjury.
Exactly. Or uttering threats. The courts constantly have to weigh the individual's right to speak against the society's right to maintain that ordered liberty. So the Charter doesn't end the debate about where the line is. It just provides the framework for having the debate.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the text moves from these sort of abstract philosophical freedoms to very physical, geographic realities.
Mobility rights.
Yes, my guide specifically highlights mobility rights. It guarantees that Canadians can live and work anywhere in the country, enter and leave Canada freely, and apply for a Canadian passport. Now, in modern Western democracies, we often just take that for granted.
Oh, completely.
Like, we view getting a passport as a really annoying administrative hassle, or we view moving to another province for, say, a tech job as a purely economic decision.
But treating mobility as just a mundane administrative task completely ignores the geopolitical rarity of that right.
Wait, really? Rare?
Historically, yes, and even in several contemporary authoritarian regimes today, internal mobility is heavily restricted.
Oh, right. Like, you can't just move to a new city.
Exactly. Systems like the Soviet Propiska or the Chinese Hukou system, they actively dictate where a citizen is legally permitted to live, to work, and to access social services. The state actually uses geography to control its population.
Wow. Okay, so the fact that the Canadian Constitution explicitly strips the government of the power to lock its citizens into specific regions or provinces is profound.
It really is.
It ensures that this massive continental landmass is totally open to the individual.
And alongside that geographic freedom, the 1982 Charter was also forced to address the pre-existing realities of the land itself.
Aboriginal people's rights.
Right. The guide clearly states that the Charter does not eliminate or negatively affect any treaty rights or other rights of Aboriginal peoples.
Okay, so it protects what was already there.
Exactly. This is a critical legal distinction. It acknowledges that Indigenous rights are not a gift granted by the 1982 Constitution. They are pre-existing rights that the Constitution is obligated to protect and integrate.
That's fascinating. And the document also addresses the institutional realities of the country's origins, specifically linguistic rights.
Yes, the official languages.
English and French are granted absolute equality of status in Parliament and throughout the federal government. So it's not just a nice nod to heritage. It is a hard-fought, legally binding requirement for how the state must communicate with its people.
Yeah, and then the text takes a very uncompromising stance on gender equality.
Oh, right. It's very explicit about that.
Extremely. It moves beyond just asserting that men and women are equal under the law to actually addressing the physical enforcement of that equality. It specifically cites gender-based violence, like spousal abuse or forced marriage, as severe crimes.
So no cultural excuses.
None at all. The underlying message is that cultural traditions or religious practices can never be used as a legal defense for violating the physical autonomy and equality of an individual. The law acts as a literal physical shield.
Which is so crucial. And all of these elements, so the linguistic dualism, the indigenous treaty rights, the strict enforcement of gender equality, they all feed into a broader societal concept that the guide defines as multiculturalism.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the framing of multiculturalism in this document is highly specific and honestly is often misunderstood.
How so?
Well, it does not advocate for a fractured society where different cultural groups live in isolated silos, operating under entirely different sets of norms.
Oh, I see. It's not about being totally separate.
Right. It actively rejects that. The Canadian legal framework views multiculturalism as the process of diverse groups living together, maintaining their heritage, yes, but being uniformly bound by the same overarching legal identity.
So it's about cohesion.
Exactly. It is designed to be a cohesive mechanism, weaving different threads into a single fabric rather than keeping all the threads separate.
Which brings us to the inevitable pivot in the source material. Because you cannot sustain a society as complex as the one we just described purely on a list of demands, right?
No, definitely not.
A constitution that only restricts the government and empowers the individual eventually just runs out of fuel. The engine of ordered liberty requires maintenance.
That's a great way to put it.
So for every right guaranteed by the Charter, the guide outlines a corresponding responsibility required from the citizen.
And this is where the social contract becomes highly visible for you. The text is unambiguous here. Having rights implies fulfilling duties.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
Exactly. The state is not a limitless provider. It is a shared enterprise. The guide outlines 6 primary responsibilities that operate on multiple levels. It starts from the deeply personal and expands outwards to the institutional and the generational.
Let's trace that expansion because it's really interesting. The most immediate fundamental duty echoes our earlier discussion: obeying the law.
Right, the prerequisite for everything else. No one is above it.
Exactly. But the very next responsibility the guide lists focuses entirely on personal agency. It mandates taking responsibility for oneself and one's family. It argues that working, caring for your dependents, and contributing to society according to your abilities are major foundational civic duties.
And framing self-reliance as a civic duty is a crucial piece of the architecture.
Yeah, why is that so central?
Well, think about it. A society that promises extensive rights and social safety nets can only afford to do so if the vast majority of its citizens are actively contributing to the system rather than drawing from it.
Oh, right. The math just doesn't work otherwise.
Exactly. By securing your own household, you lessen the burden on the state, which allows the state to direct its resources to those who are genuinely incapable of supporting themselves. Personal responsibility is the economic engine that funds ordered liberty.
So once your immediate circle is secure, the framework demands you look outward. And this is where we see citizens legally forced to participate in the mechanisms of the state. Serving on a jury is highlighted as a non-negotiable responsibility.
Yes, and the mechanism of a jury trial is the ultimate expression of the rule of law. We talked earlier about habeas corpus and the need for courts to check the power of the state.
Right.
But who checks the courts? If justice is left entirely to professional judges and state prosecutors, the system risks becoming an echo chamber of state power.
Yeah, it could get really insular.
Exactly. Jury duty forcibly injects the perspective, the common sense, and the oversight of the average citizen right into the judicial process. It is a severe disruption to your daily life, sure, but it is the price of ensuring the state does not hold the monopoly on determining guilt.
Okay, so that brings us to the democratic mechanism: voting. The guide lists voting as a vital civic responsibility across all levels: federal, provincial, territorial, local. But wait, hold on. I need to challenge the framing here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
The text places voting right alongside obeying the law and serving on a jury. But those first two are strict, legally enforced mandates.
Right.
Like, if I ignore a jury summons, the state will fine me or issue a warrant. If I decide to stay home and watch television on election day, I won't go to jail. So is voting actually a mandatory duty, or is it just a really strong suggestion wrapped in civic guilt?
This raises an important question, and it's the exact tension the guide is playing with. You are pointing out the difference between a strict legal mandate and a civic moral duty.
Yeah, because they feel different.
And they are. You are correct that Canada does not have compulsory voting laws like Australia, where you are legally fined for not casting a ballot.
Right.
However, the architectural blueprint we are analyzing treats the voluntary nature of voting as a test of the citizen. Yes. The health of a democracy relies on citizens treating their moral duties with the exact same gravity as their legal ones. If the population only participates in the society under the direct threat of legal penalty, the system is already failing.
Wow.
When you choose not to vote, you abdicate your role in the system. You're basically forcing everyone else to manage the intersection for you.
That makes the next responsibility even more compelling then, because it relies entirely on that same moral gravity. The guide explicitly calls out helping the community, specifically through volunteering.
Yes, volunteering is huge.
It mentions giving time to food banks, charities, schools, and assisting newcomers in settling down. It frames this not as a fun hobby for people with extra free time, but as a critical component of citizenship.
Because the state, no matter how well-funded or legally robust it is a blunt instrument.
What do you mean?
It cannot identify and solve every hyperlocal problem. It cannot provide the human connection required to integrate a newly arrived immigrant family into a neighborhood. Volunteering is the decentralized safety net woven by the citizens themselves. It fills the gaps that the institutional laws simply cannot reach.
And the scope of that stewardship expands beyond just helping people in the present, right?
Right.
The final core responsibility tasks citizens with protecting the nation's heritage and the environment. It demands the avoidance of waste and pollution and actively protecting natural, cultural, and architectural heritage.
And including architectural and environmental preservation in a citizenship guide is incredibly telling.
Why does that stand out to you?
Because it reinforces the idea that a citizen is merely a temporary steward of the nation. The physical environment, so the old-growth forests, the historic buildings, the clean waterways, these shape the cultural memory and the future potential of the country.
I see.
If you consume and degrade the physical space of the nation for short-term gain, you are actively robbing future generations of their inheritance. You are failing in your duty to the continuum of the society.
It's a generational responsibility.
Precisely.
And there's one final area of contribution the guide touches on. It sits slightly outside the core 6 responsibilities because it deals with the ultimate sacrifice. Defense.
Right.
The text clarifies that there is no mandatory military service in Canada. However, it elevates serving in the Canadian Forces, the Coast Guard, or emergency services as a highly valuable, exceptionally honorable way to fulfill the duties of citizenship.
Yes.
It is the ultimate commitment to protecting that framework of ordered liberty.
When someone volunteers for those roles, they are volunteering to place their own physical safety between the society they are sworn to protect and whatever threats might arise, whether those are military, environmental, or civil emergencies. It is the purest distillation of putting the collective before the individual.
We have covered a massive expanse of legal and philosophical ground today. We started with the friction between ancient common law and civil codes. We moved through the mechanical checks of habeas corpus.
We explored the geopolitical weight of mobility rights.
Yeah, and we examined the heavy moral duties of jury service and community stewardship. So what does this all mean? To synthesize all of this, the source material offers a brilliant, lasting image right at the conclusion. It asks us to picture a traditional balance scale.
It really is the most accurate visual representation of the entire blueprint.
On one side of the scale sits your rights. It is a heavy, substantial side. It holds your freedom to speak your mind, your right to travel unhindered across a continent, your protection against arbitrary arrest, and your guarantee of equality. But on the other side of the scale sits your responsibilities. It holds your obligation to obey the law, your duty to provide for your family, your mandate to sit in judgment on a jury, your moral imperative to vote, and your commitment to volunteer and protect the environment. In the Canadian framework, a good, functional citizen does not simply stand on one side of the scale, constantly demanding their rights. They actively participate. They put in the work to keep the scale balanced.
And it is an incredibly delicate equilibrium to maintain.
Yeah, it really is.
Analyzing this blueprint leaves us with a rather profound sociological question for you to mull over. If citizenship is indeed defined by this balanced scale of rights and responsibilities, what happens to the internal architecture of a society if one side becomes drastically, irreversibly heavier?
Oh, that's a chilling thought.
If an entire generation of citizens becomes hyper-focused on demanding the full extent of their constitutional rights, but slowly and quietly abandons the voluntary moral duties, if they stop voting, if they refuse to volunteer, if they view the environment merely as a resource to be consumed, does the foundational concept of ordered liberty eventually tip over and buckle under the uneven weight?
That is the exact tension this document was written to prevent, and a vital question to leave you with today. Thank you for joining us as we unpacked the true weight of this blueprint. Keep an eye on your own balance scale, and we will see you next time.